All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Talking Elite Fitness. I'm Sean Woodland with Tommy Marquez, Lauren Khalil. Tommy, how you doing?
Shaved.
Yeah, you do. You look freshly shorn.
Look different.
Yeah, I know. My wife said the same thing.
You always lose about 30 years whenever you shave off the beard. Lauren, how are you?
You know, I just came from therapy, so we're working through things.
Yeah.
That's always a refreshing time when I get off of a therapy session. So, you know.
No doubt.
I think a lot of people are. Okay, today we are going to be joined by a guest here in just a second. We're going to preface this by saying that Joshua Hicks, who is going to be our guest today, is in an airport right now. So there's going to be some background noise. His internet is not the best, but we can hear him clearly, and that is obviously the most important thing. So let's bring Joshua on now. And for those of you who don't know, Josh, how you doing? Appreciate you being here.
I'm great, guys. Good to be here.
So Joshua has worked with the CrossFit Games medical team. He worked with them from 2015, and he led them in 2022. But he's also been the director of medical and safety at Loud and Live events, Wodapalooza, West Coast Classic, Granite Games, Rogue Invitational, and he's also overseen medical security and venue control. So, Joshua, we wanted to get you on just to get your perspective on things. So my first question is, I obviously gave you a little bit of a rundown of a brief Cliff Notes version of your credentials right there, but can you, for everybody who is listening or watching, just run down your credentials, how long you've been involved in the sport, how you got involved, and what you do now?
Yeah, so I started in 2015 at the Games as just a standard volunteer on the medical team, which was a process in and of itself just to get on the team. And then over the years, I became just immersed in the games behind the scenes aspect of the medical, the preparation, all of that. And just as most volunteers find themselves getting a little deeper into it. And over the years, got a little more responsibility, and learned a lot. Now the originator of what we do at the Games, what we have done at the Games in the past is Owen Volush. And I took his, basically his design and went from that to the outside events. I've ran for the medical team. I've been the medical team lead for quite a few regionals actually before those went away. And then once we lost those, is when I really made my big step over to, I guess it was sanctionals then, but Wodapalooza and events like that. And my area of specifics there was just bringing a structure that we had for the Games over to that, and EAP design, emergency activation plan design. So those events are now pretty numerous. I was thinking about them the other day, and I've been in this a while. So not only am I old, but I've also done quite a few of these. So yeah, it's started with Wodapalooza, went from Wodapalooza to the original West Coast Classic, which was in Vegas, and Granite Games. I've done just an enormous amount of other events that are either licensed or have became licensed since then. And I also have ran medical for the Rogue Invitational.
Okay, so I'll start off here. The first question I have, this might be a lengthy answer. How are emergency activation plans put together?
So that is a very good question, and I feel like there's not a lot of information on it. Most of the people that ask me about what an emergency activation plan is have the assumption that it's 1 or 2 pages of, you know, if this happens, you call 911. If this happens, you move this person here, and just some other things like that. That's not what it is. And most of the time, the discussions that I have in leadership meetings about the EAP is that I preface it by saying that an EAP, an emergency activation plan, is a living, breathing document. So it will never be the same year to year and venue to venue. You have to change certain aspects of it. The EAPs that I write, which were based off of the EAPs that I helped kind of work on with the CrossFit Games, it was aspects of that and just learning from those who did it before me, which would be, again, apologies.
Josh was in an airport. He's been kind enough to join us.
Yeah. So yeah, the can you guys hear me over this?
Yeah. We can wait a moment.
Okay. All right. Give me just a second. I apologize.
No problem.
Please consolidate it before board. Once on board, please ensure that your personal item is installed underneath the seat in front of you.
Almost done.
Boarding process will start shortly. Thank you.
Yeah. So the EAPs, the ones that I've written, they're pretty in depth, and they grew over the years from about 12 to 13 pages to the most recent large one that I've written is about 33 pages.
Mhm.
Those start with a designation of roles for the, from the leads all the way down to.
Start the regular boarding process for flight 94, 17 to Key West, with the rows of walkthrough.
Airport life.
Thank you.
I feel like I've lived in them for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So we break down the roles from team leads that are scoring to judging, what their roles are. And the reason that we do this is because we build on the EAPs as we go down for emergency roles. Everybody has a certain department with certain people in it and certain aspects. Unfortunately, in the state of the world that we have here, I've had to add things in like acts of violence and terrorism because we have to be prepared for anything. That kind of falls under security. But we operate these EAPs in a manner that everybody has input. And our EAP, when it divulges down into the medical side of it, we have what's called inside the ropes and outside the ropes. Inside the ropes is what most people see. The inside the ropes is the decontamination, people's hands rip on bars. They've seen us walk out there and spray them off. That's the mundane aspect of med team. We handle hazardous materials. And though it might not be hazardous to you, your blood is hazardous to me, so we take care of it. And then these plans break down into ingress and egress on and off the field as well. So not only does it handle how the medical staff operates on and off the field, moving people on and off the field, but also care of action in the back of house. And this is pertinent because we use it as a guideline to calling outside sources. And in the back of each of my EAPs, you will find liaison contacts for local law enforcement or anybody we might have on site, contractors, important numbers, event directors, so on and so forth. And that's pretty much the breakdown of the EAP. In the past year, I have incorporated quick reference sheets that all the team leads get as a PDF that have high points for them to touch on so they don't have to read a 37-page document. And after an event's over, we have after action reports, and we will take into consideration anything that happened during the event that will change the EAP for the next year. And this is a long and arduous process, but it is something that we've kind of streamlined over the years at Wodapalooza and events like that. And that's why it's always kind of ever changing. But I think that's about as fast and short-winded as I could be with an answer for an EAP.
Okay.
So, you mentioned that this is a living, breathing document, and I think you said you've written over 100 of these. Is that right?
Yes.
So when it comes to like the events that you've worked at, are there any instances that you see programming or you take into consideration all of the elements and then based on the EAP, things are changed on site?
All roads, all zones, are welcome aboard. Zones 1 through 8, zones 1 through 8, welcome aboard.
Yes, so that is actually, it's written into the EAPs.
Yes, we continue our boarding process with rows 10 to 18. Thank you.
So in the EAPs, there are weather protocols. There are aspects of wind, lightning. We have lightning thresholds. We have all kinds of different aspects that would change that. Most of our event directors or coordinators, the programmers, they almost always have backup workouts if something does not hit a particular criteria for safety, and that's written into the EAP.
And maybe specifically for water events, is there any particular checklist that you can speak to as far as what needs to be included and things that you have put in just to understand the context of what that looks like for offsite water events?
So most of our offsite events fall under the same categories on these on the EAPs, and there again, it's written in there. If there's a certain aspect of the EAP that needs to be changed for a specific resource. Trail runs I could think of would be one that would require it, not a swimming event, but trail runs would be like ATVs, access like that. But yes, those are written in, and the check. Actually, that particular page for EAPs usually reads like a checklist. It's not written. An EAP is not written like a document as a book, so you're not going to see paragraph by paragraph by paragraph. It's more like an outline. That's a pretty in-depth outline, but it is more like an outline, and that outline is there for the purpose of checking off as you move down, kind of like in a logarithm.
Yeah. How are local governments and municipalities involved in putting this together? Do they have to sign off on it? Do you actively consult with them? Do they require certain personnel to be on site? What does your interaction with local governments look like when you're putting these together, especially in the case of an offsite event?
So most offsite events that I've dealt with, especially with like Wodapalooza, that would be one that everybody would be familiar with. We had a good offsite trail run this year. We spent a lot of time in the water. Those resources are what I would call a liaison. I make contact with them usually about 2 months prior to the event, do another follow-up just to kind of introduce myself. Now, Wodapalooza, most of these people are recurring in their departments, so they're fairly familiar with me and the contact information of what we're doing. But I also like, if at all possible, I've had a couple of times I've not been able to reach anybody of substance, but I try to reach out to trauma centers too, just so not to tell them to expect people, but just so they know what to expect. CrossFit is its own niche sport, so it's kind of nice if you can preface the doctors and the nurses to kind of know what to expect should we have an incident. But yes, that's kind of that's the way the offsite sources are usually contacted and connected to the group.
Flight 534 nonstop services to Syracuse. After this gate announcement, the gate doors is closing in 2 minutes. Once the gate doors close, it will not be reopened. Allegiant is waiting James Mojourn, Devin Herman, Brandon Holt, Laura Holt, and Robles.
I guess it's a whole family.
Voss, and Luciano Bajon. If you heard your name, you're the only passengers missing from flight 534 nonstop services to Syracuse. And after this gate announcement, the gate doors is closing in 2 minutes.
Okay, so so those liaison contacts are put in the back of an EAP, and that's kind of like one of those quick reference things for the event coordinators and myself. Should we have to activate a EAP full mobilization, and those things again, that's something that's going to be different municipalities. If you go to a different state, you go to a different park, they're going to require certain things, and some of the offsite events can happen at private locations, and these private locations are, they're going to have different venue requirements.
So with passengers on flight 94 services to US Park.
I really apologize.
It's all good, man. We just appreciate you coming in because I know you're on the move and your time is precious for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have another question about just local governments and things like that. So let's take Wodapalooza, for example. Wodapalooza has done open water swim. So when you are planning for an open water swim and you're trying to decide, what safety personnel you need to have deployed, what kind of involvement do they have in that sort of decision? Do they say, hey, if you're going to be here on this, on Bayfront, Bayshore, you need to at least have this? Like, is there a minimum requirement they set forth for you when you're on the water? Or is that more or less up to the event organizers?
Hello.
That is more or less up to the event organizers, but I will say that when we're a little spoiled at Wodapalooza in that you have the dock patrol out there, you have the U.S. Coast Guards out there, we have Miami-Dade on site, and they supply an ambulance that's already there, and it's just because of the specific venue we use as a public park. So these public access parks, they're going to have that.
Across our 24 miles of relaxing beaches. Dine out at world-class restaurants. Take a ride on the water taxi. Or stay a night at the iconic Hard Rock Guitar Hotel.
Location and we can
Major League Soccer.
You want to just stick with this?
Miami play
I'm going to try to walk down the hall. So if you want to,
and hockey fans
I'll try to find a better location.
Florida Panthers play
All right, we'll
at
put you
the
backstage really
Arena
fast.
in
We'll
Sunrise.
get people caught up here, and then when you're ready, we'll just pop you down. Okay. So for those of you who are maybe late to the game, obviously Josh was in an airport. We're trying to navigate that. He is a former medical staff member for the CrossFit Games. He was involved with them since 2015. He ran the whole thing in 2022, and he's also worked with a lot of other events like Wodapalooza, Granite Games, West Coast Classic, Rogue Invitational, and putting together what's called emergency activation plans. And we wanted to have him on because we're just trying to get his perspective on what goes into putting these plans together, because there's a lot of speculation and a lot of questions about how exactly do these things get put together, how do they get enacted, who is responsible for what kind of involvement do local governments have, which is obviously the conversation we're trying to have right now. So yeah, there's a lot of things, that information that we're trying to get so people have perspective, and then they can look at whatever they want to look at and draw their own conclusions.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And if you guys have some questions and you want to throw them in the chat, we'll try to get to them. There's some things that we're not going to address, but I've seen a couple good questions pop up, and we will try to get to those as we can. So, all right, let's see where he's at. He's still walking. Thanks for hanging in there with us, everybody.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Man on the move, like you said, lots of times in airports.
It's always hard to find a quiet spot in an airport. Constant announcements and other things. He's all right. He's still walking. So yeah, just to summarize, we've just been over kind of how we put these emergency activation plans together, and now we're getting into the conversation of who's involved in it. I think we'll start talking more about some other things here. It looks like he's stationary. All right. How you doing? Better?
Okay.
Yeah, sounds much better up here.
Okay, good. Sounds good. All right. So we were talking when we left, we were talking about just specific events like Wodapalooza, and when you're on the water, what kind of things need to be involved. And you kind of went through that just to catch up. Okay. I will turn this over to Tommy or Lauren if you guys have a question to follow up on that.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like if there's a specific ratio or a specific number of people like on the medical team that you need versus how many people are at an event. Does that fluctuate? Like, do you turn to the EAP for that, or what kind of involvement do you have with those specifics?
For Wodapalooza, what we've done for most of the Live and Loud events, we developed a plan that we used post 2021. We had an incident in the after action report. It was noted that we needed to make some adjustments to some things, and those adjustments were put into place to accommodate more of a streamlined, ratio that you guys are talking about. I will say this, that the ratio that we use is usually one person per one rescuer per 5 swimmers in the water. We use paddle boards, we use kayaks, and it is also good to note that we very rarely go over 400 meters. Again, it's out into an open waterway, so we have boats coming. So it's usually 200 out, and it'll somewhat will run kind of parallel to the shore. So it's a bit easier for us to maintain line of sight. But our general rule of thumb when we're doing our water events is to keep that line of sight between the rescuers and the people that we use that term rescuers a little separately from lifeguards, because we'll use water rescue people that are on our medical team. And I think it's also good to note in this that one of the staple traits of the CrossFit Games medical team, something that Owen Valouche had kind of incorporated in and ingrained in me that I took to the other events, was this side of incident command structure, something that you see in emergency services, and it makes sense because we're both in emergency services when we're not working these events. And one of the things that we do is the medical team is a heavily vetted group of professionals, and they are a professional volunteer team. So yes, they are volunteering, but they are professionals. And there have been people that have been excluded from access to the team simply on the fact that their credentials didn't match what they were saying, or they were out of date, or they didn't have the appropriate credentials. And the people that we have chosen for that will go on the water have water experience, and it is something that we can document. That's something that's been pretty predominant in the CrossFit Games space, and I just brought it over to the other area. Now, of course, we've expanded on it in years, and it's kind of became a process that.
Oh,
Oh.
we lost him.
Looks like we lost Josh.
Or-
Oh, he's back.
There we go.
Your
I was gonna
internet
say,
just broke for a moment.
Yeah, you just froze.
Okay.
You can
Last-
start.
Okay.
Last thing we heard is it's
So-
kind of become a process.
Yeah, so the process for it that and these events that are outside of the CrossFit Games has been almost an interview process to make it to the CrossFit Games medical team. So if you've been vetted with me, that information is freely shared once you put in for the CrossFit Games, and they know that they've been vetted. And then it makes the process much easier and much more professional. It's always been very, very big on professionality, honesty, integrity, and professionalism. That's something that, again, from the CrossFit Games, that's something that Owen has kind of pushed into the groups that has gone out to these other events.
So you have a ratio of one paddle, or I don't want to say paddleboard, but one person in the water who is a safety or medical personnel for every 5 swimmers, correct? Okay.
Yeah, well, we do that, and then there's usually for Wodapalooza, we have the Coast Guard are in there, and they have lifeguards as well. So that ratio usually breaks down to 1 rescuer and 1 lifeguard, give or take. Now that ratio would change if we had some change to the swim or the distance or something like that. But yeah, that's how we operate.
Okay. So what?
When you
Sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
when you worked on the medical team for the CrossFit Games, is that the ratio that you used up through 2022?
Yeah, so 2017, I think, was the first year we really had a good swim in Madison, and the numbers that we had out there were maintaining line of sight. Again, that goes back to that line of sight for rescuers, to make sure that you keep that line of sight on the swimmers at any given time, and we will stagger the rescuers out so that you can kind of keep that line of sight to the next rescuer and on the swimmers. What a lot of people don't understand with water is when you're in water, there's motion everywhere. So when you put people in the water, it's not watching 50 people run across the ground. It's watching them move across moving ground. So it's good to have a change of direction in your vision. So and yeah, that's pretty much the ratio that we use in order to maintain that. That's the ratio is almost solely derived from that line of sight.
What is the standard issue equipment that you give to these rescuers on the water?
So the rescuers that we have at Wodapalooza, they have a paddleboard. We usually have a couple paddleboards, a couple of kayaks. Kayaks tend to be a little more stable if you don't have a person that needs to get out of the water. Maybe they just are exhausted. You just need to get to them, kind of let them collect their bearings. So those work a little better for that. Now the Coast Guard, they have throw bags and a lot of the heavier rescue equipment that's going to be there. But the access to that stuff's again, that's emergency based off of their visual. And obviously the Coast Guard has an extreme oversight over what we're doing. If they see something that we don't, they're going to intervene almost immediately. So there is that. But again, with that line of sight, there's very few things that escape, although it can happen.
Okay. But sorry, go ahead, Tom.
And I was to say, and typically within that, like, obviously you have personnel out on the water. Is there any sort of training or adjustment that gets done in the lead up or before that, just to kind of familiarize with the venue? I know it can change, obviously, depending on where you're swimming, but is there any like briefing on your end or things that you do to kind of increase efficacy with that specific venue?
So yeah, and I can speak for myself pretty freely on this. Any event that we do, any of them that you guys have been there, you've seen us red shirts down on the field running drills. We do that offsite as well. We'll take 1 or 2 people with us that can be kind of oriented through the offsite, and the whole premise to that again comes from the standard that we had from the games, which was site visits for safety for the whole process. And that was one of those things that goes in the days leading up to the event, not just offsite, but any event that could be going on, any venue, any floor that we're going to have competition on. We will run drills, extricating people off the field of play, checking our ingress, our egress, making sure we're not crossing lanes of play. And there are certain EAP activations for that. That rule goes out the window. Cardiac arrest or something major like that. It's obviously all gameplay stops, and it's just a direct line, fastest route to the patient, whoever's there. So, but yeah, those are all done. We've in the past few years have been incorporating what we call a full dress rehearsal, where we will do a mock event with judges and volunteers, and we will move people on and off the field, and it may take 30 to 45 minutes going through an entire heat, and then have the entire teams extricate. We will, if we have the resources that are on site that particular day, like fire, EMS, whatever, we will have security go all the way down and run through these drills from day one, and then we'll continue with drills all the way up to the last day of competition.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think it's important to address some of the comments, because when you're talking about moving athletes off and on, I think this is something that comes front of mind. Is there typically a standard that's given out in terms of, like, if an athlete needs assistance, are they DQ'd? Does it change event to event? I know that's been a part of the discussion about whether or not an athlete's worried that if they receive help, their weekend could be over, and that could be a deterrent. And I'm just curious where that line has been, or typically is in your experience.
I mean, most of those things that I've had any type of discussion at any event has always been very reasonable in their discussions about that. And that we're not gonna, if you're on a bike ride and you wreck your bike and your knee hurts, we're not going to put you on a cart and take you 400 meters forward to evaluate you and then put you back on the cart to run, because that would obviously be cheating. But within reasonable expectations, the safety is the priority. If we have somebody who has a significant injury, or we have a high suspicion of something major going on, we will usually, that's when you'll see the red shirts making it out onto the field. They're coming out to evaluate that and see where to go from there, and it's usually left up to the athlete themselves to make the call, whether they want to be extricated, or if they feel they can go on. And the evaluation's not taken lightly. It's not something, you're not, just because we go out and make sure you're okay and check on you, that does not mean that you're disqualified. That does not mean that. That's historically been the truth. It's just been about safety.
Sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, I'm just kind of going through comments as well. Going back to when you were speaking about the ratio, is that ratio something your team came up with as the goal, or is that the minimum that you would like to see, that 1 to 5?
That was that ratio that I spoke to is the ratio that we used at Wodapalooza, and it's something that we like to have there. I would like to be overly prepared for something than to be underprepared and need resources. And if we don't feel safe about a water event, then we sit down and have a discussion the night before, or any event. I should say water, but any event. We'll sit down and talk the night before, and maybe make some changes to it to accommodate the resources that we have.
A few years back at Wodapalooza, I think it's 2021, there was an incident where a got lost, or they couldn't account for a member of a 3-person team. And I remember that was a really scary moment.
Yeah.
How did the team react to that, and what were the protocols in place that you followed to work through that problem?
So at that point in time, that athlete had exited the water. The minimum work requirement was to reach the water. She had exited the water, and her ankle tag, she had taken off and dropped it there. And we were unable to locate her. And when we the first indication that something was wrong was that they exited the swim and entered to a run that was on an assault run. And there's three team members there and only 2 running. So we've got people in the water going back and forth. And when that information is relayed to me, I went straight to the back of house, got the paperwork that we had for emergency contact information, and immediately start the process of trying to locate her. When there is no definitive location for that, we did what we call a full EAP activation, and we stopped the event. And there were people actually running to the water, and we stopped them before they entered the water. So that was a full EAP activation, very similar to the way that we would do if we had an activation that might affect spectators or something like that. We're going to have a complete stop to promote further movement and safety.
We thank you for your attention to this important issue.
That was there.
And were there any revisions after that experience? Any things that you carried forward to other EAPs or interactions like at the games or beyond?
Yeah, so after 2021, we did again, that comes down to the after action reports. I'd written in the after action reports things that could have been better on that. For me, it was communication to the back of house for emergency contacts. All of that changed. And then my role shifted a little bit the next year. That's when the director of medical and safety came in, started incorporating a lot of venue control. Venue control can access the back of the house in the same manner that medical can, but it gives us runners that can move faster. So we were able to do that. The EAP itself, for an EAP activation, was very streamlined and very laid out. So we were able to operate it that way. I just felt that it could be a little more efficient. And that's the way that we wrote out a very, very defined shutdown clause for an event. And it's something that we've utilized since at all events. So if there is and it's basically at the discretion of me or one of the event directors, not stage leads, but the director of competition, stuff like that. We'll have a discussion very quickly. If one of us sees something that needs to stop, it stops right then. So.
Sorry, Sean.
No, go ahead.
When creating these EAPs and revising them and trying to figure out what the best way forward is for each specific event, who else, from your experience, have you leaned on for information? Do you reach out to triathlon experts if it's going to be a run, swim, bike event, or like who else has input to make sure that it is the most informative document for each event?
So EAPs, usually the whole process starts many months before the event, and it will be an entire process of communicating specifics to the event. We may not have all of the events in stone at that point. It just kind of puts it on our radar to maybe be looking out for this element or that element, and we'll do a little research. Thankfully for us, a lot of that research it's already been done by either other sports, and when I say us, I mean the other events that I run medical for. Not the CrossFit Games. The CrossFit Games has historically done tons of research prior to that, so we are thankfully able to kind of lean on that information in order to build out what we have. But I have communicated with some people that have a little more information on biking, because that was something I never had. I had a lot of experience with, and we've leaned on other experts for other things, especially with adaptive or something that may have a very specific set of needs for the event. So yes, we do reach out for that, and again, like I said, the process for writing an EAP starts many months beforehand and is incorporated into the whole planning process.
And just kind of reiterate something that you said. You meant, if anyone's joining us new, you mentioned that it's a living, breathing document, right? It's not something that's set in stone and that can be updated as you go and day of. Typically, I mean, I know every situation is different, but is there, in general, a frequency with which you update it as the competition goes along, or is that common? Is it uncommon?
It's pretty common to make changes. Most of them are small, and they typically move around mundane things, small details, faster ways to move people back of house to the clinic, to whatever you need to do, and even equipment or equipment safety, moving heavy equipment, forklifts and stuff like that. Just things that we notice along the way. We'll take notes and we'll fill them out, put them in the after action report, and then take the after action report and apply those notes to the different sections of the EAP to see what needs to be changed. And it typically doesn't happen in the event. We have too much going on. It's usually for the next year or the next event, we can make the necessary changes. And, likewise, we might see a change that goes in there and try it a different way, and that way not be as efficient as it was originally, and go back to it. But it's typically the small things, although rarely we will get big things, but typically the small things are what we want to, the minute details will really button up these activation plans.
Who ultimately, when you put your emergency activation plan together, you figure out kind of what the event is going to require from your standpoint, what you think as far as personnel, who needs to be on the floor, amount of people that you need. Who ultimately decides whether or not you get those resources?
I've never had an issue getting resources. It's the number with which that we have that we're given, that we work, and then occasionally, we've ran the rotations, the staff on the field to see it's all about continuity of coverage at these events. So if we have somebody in lane 1 that goes down and we have to escort them off, obviously that's going to remove some medical personnel from the field. So what we do on that is we usually have a team on standby, and that's kind of their break time. They'll be able to eat, they'll be able to kind of get off their feet for a little bit, take a rest, but everybody's on call. So if we do have one of those extrications where somebody leaves the field to play, then that other team that's on rest or on break will come backfill that location. So there is a continued continuity of care. Mm-hmm. I don't know of a single time where we have run out of medical personnel or coverage on the field. We've always had the resources that we've needed. And there have been a couple of times where we've looked at the layout, we've looked at the floor plan, and we've looked at the number of personnel we have on the floor and discussed that we could make it work. But realistically speaking, if we were to have an event, we would need more people, and we put in a request and got it.
Okay. So you've never come up with a plan and said, hey, I need 100 people, and no one's ever said, we can only give you 50. Like, that's never happened.
No. Now we'll say this is worth noting that occasionally on a volunteer basis, if let's say I needed 30 for an event and 29 people sign up, I don't really have a pool to bring more people in from that. So that would affect numbers. Okay. And that has on occasion been a challenge that we've had to overcome. That is literally nobody has control over that.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. All right. There's some decent questions here that are coming in the chat.
Yeah.
Let's see. So one of them is from Zach. Do you guys? I'm assuming that the medical team gets read in on all the events so you can properly prepare. It's not like you're getting stuff dumped on you at the last minute like the athletes are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a process. There'll be, and now obviously not every single person on the med team is privy to all of the information, but the people that are going to be planning, if we have somebody that is going to be going to a specific off-site event and won't be on-site for the rest of the events, they'll be read into what's going on, and they'll take a very close look at it. And this is, all of these things that I'm talking about are not, an hour or 2 hours before the event. They are weeks and months ahead of time. It is a very arduous, detailed process to build these out.
And how often are you in communication with the competition organizers before, during, and after the event? And do you have any after event meetings to discuss, the strengths, and even when you were talking about the Wodapalooza incident, things that could be improved on for the next one?
Every event I've ever worked is constant communication. We have team lead meetings. I have email correspondence. I talk to key players. I would honestly say at least weekly, sometimes more. As we get closer, sometimes it'll move 2 to 3 times a week, especially if I have questions, if we're doing planning. If I feel like something's changed and we need more personnel, that's a discussion that would have. I mean, it can even go all the way down to volunteer relations needing more waters and having to have a discussion about a different way to get that access. These are all conversations that happen, and every event I've ever worked at, they ramp up as you get closer to the event, but it's almost constant communication.
Are there any sort of, this question from Robbie Southwards, do you take medical evaluations prior to athletes stepping on the floor to create a baseline?
We do not at the events that I have worked. We do have a form for them to disclose things to us. And then I have been, thankfully, I have been able to have some conversations with athletes who had pre-existing problems who felt comfortable coming and talking to us. And, you know, that comes down to having trust. And we have historically been able to hopefully, I feel we've been able to earn the athlete's trust enough to come to us and say, hey, I take this prescription. I've been sick for the past week. I have this going on. I'm recovering from this. And we keep a very close eye on them while that's going on. And if at any point they need to come check in with us, they check in with us. We've had injuries or incidences on the field where an athlete came off the field, felt very bad, or had an injury they wanted to get checked out, and they would follow up with us through the rest of the event. And these conversations, I can't go into great detail because HIPAA laws still apply, and we are going to do our very, very best to protect the integrity and everything with the athletes. So, but yeah, I've very rarely, I have on occasion had to pull an athlete from competition, but that's not something taken lightly. You know, we involve coaches and family and everybody in that. We give them every detail that we can. And then the decision is made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do have a question regarding the structure of the medical team, because I think there are some, either maybe some confusion or people just don't know what that looks like. Typically the medical team, what people view as are the red shirts, right? We recognize them. You can see them pretty clearly on the floor, but the team is more than just the red shirts. So our team leads, and usually they're wearing black shirts or something similar. And can you kind of explain the difference in how that hierarchy works?
Yeah. So if you have a team like this, then anybody that works emergency services is going to understand incident command structure. And incident command structure, you can have a group of 60 professionals, and not everybody needs to be privy to all of the information. You need to be able to take the most detailed information so people can focus on different aspects. And that's essentially where your leads or your black shirts would come from. That would be the ones that are really truly involved in the in-depth planning. And that's expanded over the years because, you know, the event's gotten bigger. We've got more athletes. We've needed more approach to that, needed the ability for people to make decisions. And that's why that expanded. So yes, the structure's laid out. Now, the way that I structure Wodapalooza and any of the other events that I do, it is the same thing. My goal when I went away from the CrossFit Games and focused the vast majority of my time to these other events is I wanted to bring the standard that we had at the Games to the other events. And that wasn't because I thought they weren't doing well or that there was an issue there. It was just that for me, being passionate about the sport and caring about the community, I wanted the athletes to know that it's the same thing everywhere they go where they see us. And these people have really held the line with the standard. So when you go to speak about the structure that we have, if you have a field of play, and I keep going back to Wodapalooza because it's probably the one people know the most. For stage names and stuff, but we'll say Wodapalooza, you've got Flagler and you've got 10 people on the competition floor. You will have a team of 2 individuals on the right side of the field and a team on the left side. Each one will be in constant contact with the stage lead. I was doing good.
Whether you are coming home or visiting,
You know, it's hard at an airport until you need their matches at an airport.
Yes. It's almost me.
Plus, there is fun for the whole family. Plus, our 24 miles of relaxing beaches. Sign out for World Best Festivals.
Anyway, so the structure that we had, you have 2 people on the right side, 2 people on the left. You have a rotational team that we could take, and again, that goes back to the backfield. If we have to remove anybody, it's for rest periods, it's for also extricating. And then you'll have a stage lead. That one person that I assigned for that stage is there to get resources should they need it. And when I say resources, I don't mean 911. I don't mean bandaging or anything like that. I mean, it could be they need some waters, they need some decon equipment, they need an extra ladder, and that person can leave the floor without leaving a gap in care. And that was, again, this was the structure that we brought from the games that Owen came up with, and we've just kind of expanded on it over the years. But yeah, so you would have that group of people there, and they're kind of their own little medical entity. Then you've got the other 2 fields that would have the same setup, and then there's a person that's moving between all 3 stages, which would be a liaison to me for the heavier stuff. Should we have any AP activation, need 911 and an ambulance on site, we have that moving in and out of there. And then you'll have a crew in the back. We call it clinic. It's just a med tent where people can go to get their hands dressed or a closer checkup or something like that. But that's the structure that we have. And that structure has served us very, very well. Now, it's also good to note that if you see a particular group of medical staff on Flagler, the next day they're probably going to move in a clockwise manner to the next stage. So we're moving them through the stages. Fresh eyes mean the world in this sport. When you're standing on concrete for 16 hours, you really need to be able to take some time off your feet to get a refresh, get something to eat, and then come back. And then the next day, you don't need to be staring at the same set of lanes. So that's kind of the structure.
Okay, you mentioned sometimes you just don't have enough volunteers, so therefore you have a shortage of personnel. In the event that on occasion, so on the times where that has taken place, how does that affect the way you deploy people, and does that have sort of a ripple effect into how you think the event should play out? If you get my question.
Yeah, I do. I understand. Thankfully, we've not had an incident where there have been a critically low number of staff. So my preparation, again, it's something that I took from the games. Owen has always been very diligent in over preparing the team. So if we felt we needed 50 bodies on the floor, then for the event, then we would request 60, and we would have that 10-point buffer. Every event you work, you're always going to have things come up, and somebody is going to drop out. So you always want to be a little over prepared for that. It's not that difficult, and I'm not taking away from it, but it's not that difficult to get somebody who can help with equipment at the last minute locally, or if you've got a friend, it's not that difficult to get somebody that can help with athlete liaisons. And I'm not discrediting those groups. I'm just saying it's a little more difficult when you need an EMT with proper licensure and CPR treatment, and you need them local and you need them now. That's much different.
Yeah.
So we have been very fortunate in that I would dare say that if you've gone to any event, North America and Europe, you have probably, even South America at this point, if you've seen somebody on the floor in a red shirt there, you've probably seen them somewhere else.
Yeah.
We're pretty tied in together, and that has for the benefit of the entire sport and the community, that's been wonderful. So we do have some resources that we can reach out to. But yes, it has, on occasion, it has affected the numbers that we put to the field. The way that I normally do it is I plan for a 3-person team to be on either side of the field with a rotational 3-person team. If we do reach what I would consider critical, which is probably just a 10% drop, but if we reach a point where I can't have those numbers, then we'll backtrack, pull them down, and put 2-person teams, because a 2-person team on either side of the field is that's totally fine to move people on and off, because essentially you just need 2 to move a person.
Mm-hmm.
So that 3rd person is just there for the buffer. and we can pull them off and make almost double the number of placements on the field by doing that. And that, again, that's something that I just incorporated from my experience at the games. It's something that you want to overshoot the need in case something happens that causes you to undershoot personnel. So.
Mm-hmm. I got a couple questions that people have asked some stuff real quick. Can you disclose who's going to oversee medical at Masters and Teens games? Because obviously that's on the horizon. So I think people have that, forefront.
Yeah. So the pit teams has their own group of people there, but I've been in communication with them. I've helped them work on a lot of the EAP stuff. And then I will be down at Legends. We have a team. We've already finished the vetting process. I've actually almost gone through all my emails and put the documents. I keep a spreadsheet. I'm a little OCD when it comes to stuff like that, so things are color coded. And if you got one of my EAP quick charts, it would probably look very fancy. But the layout for all of those, that's going to be me at Legends. And then I usually work with WillWad as well. It's just this year we had some overlapping scheduling conflicts, and I'd already committed somewhere. So I am still deeply involved with it. We do have great personnel that are out there, and I'm going to be taking care of that one as well. It'll just kind of be in a remote fashion, and then hopefully back to normal next year.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the athletes have. Yeah, we know that the athletes have their athlete briefings, the workout and event briefings, but is there ever any briefings where the athletes, managers, coaches are up to speed on what the medical plans are, or is that something that is totally separate?
Yeah, so again, I can speak on the Wodapalooza events and everything I've ever done. Every event I've ever done, they've always incorporated medical into the speak. It's always been part of the athlete onboarding, the initial communication, just so they have a good face to kind of put with it. Like, hey, this is medical. This is your central point of contact. And I always end this, in these discussions with our care doesn't stop at the finish line. If you need us, you can reach out to us. We're available to you for the entirety of the event. Documentation's a big deal for us. So, that's kind of part of that process. We always want them to know that we're there for them, essentially, and that's why we have historically been incorporated into that. And then also to let them know if you and this is where the conversations usually come in if somebody has a pre-existing issue. We'll ask them, hey, you don't have to come down right now. Just find me at the back of this and we can discuss it and we'll take notes of it. And if we need to get a baseline, we'll do a baseline, but it's all about safety when it comes to that. And we have to also keep in mind that individuals have different needs for privacy. So we kind of give them their own leeway to come to us and don't make it where everybody has to line up as soon as they get on site and tell us all their issues back to back to back. So.
Have you ever been involved in an event where there was a need to rescue an athlete in the water?
I have been. Well, I can speak for Wodapalooza for sure. Wodapalooza, we have had to pull athletes out of the water, and that's what the paddleboard is for. We've got them to shore from that. Occasionally, for us, it has thankfully not been too far off the shore when we've had these issues. So, and also in a quick access to somebody that was there or a buoy.
Okay. Yeah. I think someone brought this up. Do you think? I think Carly mentioned it earlier in the show. Is the nature of the swim? Someone mentioned out and back being it will reduce the number of points that people could be and medical personnel can be on stationary. You can see it below. I'm kind of paraphrasing. Would an out and back potentially reduce risks in terms of how you're able to deploy? Have you seen that in your profession?
I don't know that is essentially something that would make a massive difference on that. I know we have at Wodapalooza taken 90-degree turns. The big thing for us is that we want, again, it comes down to that line of sight. So, the distance isn't necessarily the greatest barrier that we have. It's that line of sight. Obviously, if I've got a 200-meter swim and I've got 3 people there, then the line of sight's going to be maintained. But if I take that 200-meter swim, and I turn it to 2 miles, I'm going to need vastly more resources to maintain that. So that would come down on an incident by incident layout, basically.
Got it.
I think that's how I understood her to ask that question.
Yeah. There are this incident with Lazarus obviously affected a ton of people. And everyone's talking about it. And thank you for coming on and giving us some perspective. And I'm just curious how now seeing this happen has affected the way that you're going to go about doing your job in the future. Has it changed anything about the way you approach stuff? Has it made you more aware of things, or just what has the impact been on you?
I think I'm going to hold my thoughts on any major changes I have until after we get the investigation in. Because that's, essentially that's going to give us all the details. And I believe right now that we have a lot of people, and I understand that the community's hurting and everybody is hurting. A lot more people than the community realizes. But I think that once the details come out, it's gonna be necessary to evaluate those and see what they are. It would be hard for me to make a decision on how I'm doing things when the safety at the very base of what I started with was the number one priority. And, I can make the best system in the world. And 2021 Wodapalooza is a solid example of that. I was 100% confident in what we had there and still needed improvement. I think at the point we feel that we've made it and there's no more improving to be done, I think that, and I've always felt this way, that's complacency. And that's not what we want to get to. We want to, and again, that goes right back to the EAP talk that I had. It's a living, breathing document. You can never rest on your laurels with that. And that has been ingrained with me since day one at the games. We are constantly evolving. As a matter of fact, our motto is not only honesty, integrity, and professionalism, but it's also Semper Gumby, always flexible.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you guys want to get to?
It's kind of what I've had prepared, and off the top of my head, like as you said, there's a lot of details we don't know yet. So getting beyond that, I think wouldn't necessarily be prudent or wise. But just gratitude for the conversation, Hicks, as always.
Yeah, thank you so much for providing some perspective here. We really appreciate you willing to come on and just give us an idea of how these things work, how you've done it in other events, just for some perspective, like I said, so we can make more informed judgments on stuff. And like everyone here is saying, so many more details need to come out, but we just really appreciate the time, and thanks for finding a relatively quiet spot in the airport where you could talk to us, and have safe travels, man. Looking forward to seeing you soon. We'll be seeing you in Birmingham, right? You'll be at the Masters.
Yeah, I will be in Birmingham, and I would like to say something, if that's all right, to anybody watching. I'm gonna be releasing a video later today, if you are an event coordinator, if you have an event coming up and you have a water swim and you would like to look over what we have done historically in the past at Wodapalooza, I'm going to make those resources available. You do not have to preface the phone call, the DM, the email with how much is it going to cost. It's nothing. I just want to make it available to the community. And whatever I need to make people feel safer with this, I want them to know that it's there. The resource is there. So I will probably put it out when I'm not in an airport, but I will probably put it out so that people can hear the whole thing, and that they can reach out to me should they need anything like that. And also would like to say that I've taught CPR for a long time, and one of the things that I teach all my classes at the very end is when the deed's done and everything's over, you need to check on your people. And I think at the end of this, we are all a community. And there are people that were on staff there. There are people that were competing there and volunteers there that are seriously hurting. So reach out, and if you need the resource, it is there.
I appreciate you, Hicks.
Appreciate you.
Travels, man. We'll let you go, and I don't want to add anything. That's a great way to end. And again, thank you, Josh. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Take care, buddy.
All right, Joshua Hicks, really appreciate his time. And once he gets that video out, we will do our best to link to that or put it up on our Instagram. So if you guys want to access that, you certainly can. So that is going to do it for this episode. Really appreciate Joshua Hicks taking the time to stop by and join us. Thanks, everybody, for participating in the chat. And thank you for your questions. We'll have more on this as the weeks continue and as information continues to come out. So keep checking our Instagram, keep checking our YouTube page. If you guys haven't already subscribed, go to subscribe and you'll get a hit the notification button. And anytime we go live or put something else out, you guys will know. We have a lot of interviews coming too that Lauren and Tommy were able to gather on site. So we'll be putting those out as well. Yeah. And as Joshua said, check on your people, guys. Check on your people. Just, it never hurts.
Yep. No doubt.
Okay. For Tommy Marquez and Lauren Khalil,